Fort Fritz, your one-stop for news, current events, and all forms of entertainment relating to the paranormal, the supernatural, the Fortean, and things that go bump in the night, all packaged and presented in the form of know-nothing know-it-alls entertaining the unknown. Hello, I am your host, Fritz, and for the next hour, we are going to get into our favorite stories. I am on vacation, so I am going to present stories by Angela, Mandaddy, and Kaz, but I wanted to start off with a current events article. This recently happened. The Tasmanian tiger, or the thylacine, declared extinct 80 years ago, has been spotted 8 times in the past 3 years. We recently have talked about the Tasmanian tiger a few months ago. This is an article from The Independent. It's good news, obviously, because everyone wrote this animal off and said it was extinct. But the large striped marsupial carnivore is almost the Tasmanian Loch Ness monster. It had powerful jaws, yellowish striped fur. It was like a mix between a wolf and a fox. But it also had a little pouch for carrying its young, kind of like a kangaroo. The most recent sighting, a couple in Western Australia who were vacationing in Tasmania saw it walk right across the road, and it said it looked back at their car multiple times, but for about 12 to 15 seconds, they saw it. Why didn't they take a video of it? We may never know. But enough about the Tasmanian tiger. Let's talk about America's first serial killer family, shall we? This is presented by Angela. It's one of my favorite stories she's ever done. It's the Bloody Benders, America's first serial killer family. You can just download that iHeartRadio app and search Fort Fritz, and also Fort Fritz Campfire Tales. That's where you'll find this one.
This is the Bloody Benders. I know it.
Peaky Blinders?
Close.
But the Kansas version.
But the Kansas version.
Oh.
The Whiskey Blinders.
Nice.
Everything's always whiskey. So this story is like the Oregon Trail, but with one death for all that is brutal and bloody. And true, like the Donner Party, but more sinister and actually less efficient.
Jeez. Hell of a sell.
The Bender family consisted of 4 members: John Bender Sr., Elvira Bender, John Bender Jr., and Kate Bender. The rumors surrounding the Bender family were varied. John Sr. and Elvira had their children from previous marriages, so John Jr. and Kate were known to be stepbrother and sister. However, some whispers about town maybe speculated that they weren't their children, but a younger married couple who lived with John Sr. and Elvira.
Ooh.
Creepy already.
Yeah.
After the American Civil War, our country did a pretty embarrassing thing and relocated a bunch of Native Americans from the Osage tribe in Kansas to a new territory now known as Oklahoma. When this land was opened up in Kansas, it attracted a few spiritualist families. One of those families was the Bender family.
Like to live with these Native Americans?
Yes, as they said. John Bender Sr. was a man in his 60s when he and his son John Jr. purchased land in Labette County, Kansas. And this is about 7 miles northeast of Cherryvale. Really, no one knows where any of this is. But anyway.
That's the closest thing.
Yeah.
700 miles for
So-
It was that close to Cherryvale?
nothing else.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I love that they have all the information. It's like really close to Cherryvale. And it's like, where the hell is Cherryvale?
700 miles is really close.
7.
I think you said 700.
7 miles.
7 miles.
Northeast of
That's why I was
Cherryvale.
confused.
I actually looked it up, and it's like in between St. Louis, Missouri, and Austin, Texas. It's like in between a bunch of big cities.
In
That's all
like the ass
farmland.
corner of Kansas?
It is in the southeast corner
The
of Kansas.
ass corner
The
of Texas.
ass corner of
The
Kansas.
ruralist of the rural.
Kansas.
Kansas!
So John Sr. and John Jr., they had purchased land in 1870, and they registered about 160 acres of land in the Great Osage Trail. So that was the trail, like the only known safe trail, like passage to the west at the time. So this was in 1870. So a cabin, a barn, and a corral and a well was built on the property in 1871. And that's about the time that Elvira and Kate kind of showed up. So it was just John Sr. and John Jr. And then all of a sudden Elvira and Kate showed up.
So he was a single dad?
Yes, and she was a single mother.
Brady Bunch.
Brady Bunch.
The Bloody Bunch.
The Bloody Bunch. The Bloody Bunch.
I don't like this.
So because of their house being on that trail, their home kind of operated like an inn. So people would pass through there. They had like a general store in front. You could like stay overnight. They would give you dinner.
Everything about this is creeping me out.
Yeah, there's
like
nothing
Hateful
else around them.
Yeah.
And it was, it was small. They had common areas, and then also there was like a whole 2-acre vegetable garden, apple orchard.
Damn.
And the weird thing was about this family, not only did it seem like single dad, single mother, they just had a lot of random rumors surrounding their background. They were known for being German immigrants, but there was really no documentation for them, or their relationships to one another either. Possibly only the male bender, so John and John Sr., John Jr., were born overseas. And they're not even sure if he was like from Germany or the Netherlands.
What's the difference?
Yeah,
I was gonna say, at that point,
it's
Come
like
on.
Different types of mustard, or
Yeah.
And it was also, Elvira may have not even been German at all. She may have been born somewhere near the Adirondack Mountains. And she actually had some rumors that she had married a bunch of times and had murdered all of her husbands.
Ooh, black. Oh.
Yeah.
That she had 12 children.
Ooh.
But when she...
tell me what's new about that? Like,
That's a lot of kids.
It's a lot of kids.
Yeah.
And
You have them.
the ooh part is the fact that she only moved here to Kansas with one of those kids. So, like, what?
Yeah, I didn't even.
What the hell happened?
I would not
gotta
have even.
eat.
sowing
Yeah.
them wild oats.
And some people even speculated that John and Kate, so the children, were actually another married couple. And they were just kind of saying that they were their kids, but they were actually this other younger couple that lived with John
Cohabitating,
Sr. Yes.
interage couples.
Like a hot
Strange.
stepdaughter, stepbrother.
This is way too 70s.
Yeah.
It's like 1970s, not 1870s.
Right, thank you.
Right?
Thank you.
As it was said, John Sr. and Elvira were in their like 50s, 60s, and everyone said they did not speak nor understand much English. And they really liked everyone to think that. And Elvira was described as a very unfriendly woman and sometimes called she-devil by neighbors. And her and John Sr. kind of kept themselves for the most part. However, John Jr. and Kate, their children, or just the younger couple that
Cool
lived
couple
with
that
them,
was just chilling.
This is so nuanced.
they said that they had an accent, but they spoke fluent English. They were known as friendly, charismatic, and very good-looking. However, sometimes John Jr. was, and this is what was quoted, he was talked about as being a nitwit.
All right.
You don't use that one enough
No,
nowadays.
you don't.
freaking
Yeah.
nitwit.
It's got some bite to it.
He does. What a nitwit. And he would just laugh aimlessly.
I like that, though. That's charming.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a-
Somebody who's
He's
just got a
happy.
jack. Yeah, somebody who's just got kind of like a ha 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 ha.
It's better than just like screaming aimlessly.
Right.
It's like, better than that.
I was thinking like this, like systemic depression of like, yeah.
Or just sigh, being the sad boy and just sighs.
Yeah,
like,
just
you know,
sad
like-
boy.
Just an emo kid sitting on the corner.
He was just like ha 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 ha. Like
The
that's
opposite of an
endearing to me.
overconfident boy is sad boy.
Does it ever bother you that people who were clearly insane and couldn't speak English and came like are like, you know, able to procure 160 lands of like rural like Kansas and live this like really, you know, what I would consider to be a lavish lifestyle if you've got that much land and a 2-acre vegetable garden and a corral and all kinds
Because land was like $1.50 for 5 acres, you know?
Man, we need
Yeah,
to go
it's
back.
true. I know we do need to go back. People would just murder you, and there'd be no record.
We would be
Angela, people just murder you.
well, she
a
knows
great
the story
time.
apparently.
Great
Like,
time. All the unaccounted murders.
Spoiler alert.
Make America great again.
Kate, who is the daughter or wife of John Jr., she considered herself a healer and psychic, and that's how she attracted people towards the inn. And she also promised she could just cure illnesses. We don't really know how. She also conducted seances and was known for her free love spiritualism. Less than a year after the Benders arrived, some very mysterious disappearances and horrific murders began to occur. First, there was a man named Jones, I'm assuming his last name, who had his skull crushed and his throat cut. And he was discovered in Drum Creek. So that was in 1871. So they bought this property in 1870. And by May of 1871, they found this guy with his skull crushed and throat cut.
Already.
couldn't make it a year.
Then in February 1872, the bodies of 2 men were found who had the same injuries as the previous guy. So within 2 years of them moving on to this trail, people started avoiding that area altogether and try to find different ways to go to the west. I mean, that was kind of the reputation that area.
You want to go down
having.
Skull Crush Trail?
Why is it named that? No bother.
This is like an
Good
early
luck.
version of Waze. Just let you know where to go. You don't want. Oh, you want to stay from there. There's a lot of skull crushing in that area.
Yeah, so, okay, Angela, earlier you were saying this was one of the main,
This was one of
paths
the main
west.
ways to go west, and then within 2 years, people were like, "No, I'll find a different way."
So that was
traveling out to California and just heading west. That was one of the main. That was one of the known safe ways to get out there. And then all of a sudden, it was like, "No,
Nope.
your
Bone
head's going to
Crush.
explode."
It went from Kansas Trail to
Yeah.
Skull Crush Throat Slitty Trail, and then everybody was like, nah, I'm not
I'll
And then
go.
they're like, have you
We'll go
seen
around.
Blood River? They're like, I'm out.
going to Nebraska.
In the winter of 1872, so this is still within that 2 years of them buying this, George Lancourt and his daughter Mary Ann left Independence, Kansas,
Yes.
to resettle in Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
And
Hawkeyes.
Oh, all right, go them.
Go them. Enthusiasm appreciated.
Go them sports.
Sports.
Sportsies.
Holy
That's a promo.
sports.
That's a promo.
That's tight.
Well, the sad thing is, these people were never seen again. So George,
The laugh in
Son
your
of a
voice doesn't make
bitch.
it sound so sad.
You hurt this
They
bastard.
were never seen again.
I hurt this bastard.
George and Mary Ann were never seen again. They happen to have a really good friend, though. Their neighbor, who lived in Independence, Kansas, Dr. William Henry York. He was like, I never heard back from them. Where did they go? So he went looking for them. And the sad thing is, Dr. York never returned home either. The other problem is, for the Benders at least, is that Dr. York had 2 brothers who were like, well,
Where the,
where the hell's my
Yeah.
brother? And
Oh,
so
man, a brother's revenge.
and one of his brothers was a colonel. So he was just very intense.
It's
Colonel
on.
Ed York.
This is going to be a
and-
Coen Brothers movie. You mark my
Oh,
words.
yeah. Ooh.
And a Kansas State Senator, Alex York.
The other
So-
one was a senator?
Yeah.
A colonel and a
Yes.
senator?
So they were like, they knew his travel plans. He let them know, hey, I'm going to go find my neighbors. Never returned. Colonel York gathered about 50 men
It's a posse.
and questioned every traveler along the trail and visited every single homestead in that area. So he arrived at the Bender's Inn. He asked about his brother. And they were honest. They said, yeah, he stayed with us, but maybe he ran into trouble with the Native Americans. And, Colonel York was like, sure, I guess that could happen since we just relocated all of them somewhere else. I
Quite a
bet they're
little
kind of
tick-off right
angry,
now.
Classic
you know.
fake news ass bullshit.
However, he later returned to the inn with some armed men because he had been informed that a woman had fled from the inn after being threatened with knives by Elvira Bender.
Oh, okay.
So when they went to go question Elvira, she pretended she couldn't understand English, and they denied the claim. But all of a sudden, Elvira, who apparently couldn't understand English, all of a sudden started saying, oh, that woman's a witch. She cursed my coffee. And then
Didn't
she
even
was like,
wake me
get
up?
out of my house. So they were like, okay, so this woman knows way more English than we thought she could. And everything about her response and her reaction, they were like, oh, these people totally did something to all these people. But they didn't have any evidence. They could just tell, like, there's something up here. Neighboring communities around the area began to make accusations about Osage County, which is where they lived. They were like, everyone around here has been disappearing. Like, what's going on? And they kind of were blaming Osage County. So a meeting was arranged, and the Osage Township began, they had like 75 locals there, and including John Bender Sr. and John Bender Jr. So, like, the Bender men actually came to this meeting. And they were like, well, we're going to have a search warrant. And we're going to search every homestead from Big Hill Creek to Drum Creek. And no one knows where the hell that is, but
Do
just
it.
so you have it.
Yeah,
there you go.
7 miles
There it is.
So-
northeast of Cherryvale.
Do it up right.
Yep. The problem was, so these guys were at that meeting and they made this big declaration. No one kept an eye on the Benders and they all split.
Nice.
Sneaky
the
ass
classic. What's it called?
Okie doke.
I was about to say okey doke. I swear I was going to say okey doke.
The
It's
okey
a
doke.
classic okey doke.
The
As the
okey doke
Scot-
shit out of them.
Okay, doke.
It's like Sun Tzu. It's in the Art of War. It's the classic okey doke.
Keep your friends close, your enemies okey doke 'em.
Okey doked.
So it would have been about 3 days before anyone even noticed that these people had been gone. They abandoned all their farm animals, they were all unfed, and also there was a bunch of bad weather, so the search had to be held off. But eventually a giant mob showed up, and the search party at the end began with Colonel York. He was like there. He's like, "Where's my brother? What's going on? Let's do this." So they get there, and the cabin was empty of food and personal belongings and had a really foul odor. Then they realized there was a trap door and clotted blood on the floor. So they realized there must be something in there. So they actually took all these men and moved the entire cabin. They're like, "There are bodies. We're moving the whole structure over."
Why did they just open the door? Why did they just open the trap door?
It's probably locked.
Well, it was a dumb move.
See?
Because there was nothing there. However, they started to explore the entire grounds around the cabin and the garden. And in the soil of the orchard, they found Dr. York's body, buried face down. And they found 9 graves, but it was getting dark, so they came back the next morning. They found 8 bodies in the 9 graves, and a body in the well with a bunch of body parts. Every skull was bashed with what was assumed was a hammer, and every throat was cut.
They double tapped everything.
Exactly. I was
Everything.
going to say, come on.
The only one that didn't have any of these injuries was the body of a young girl, and but they suspected that maybe she had been strangled or buried alive.
Ugh. I think I'll take the strangling over the buried alive. I don't know.
State Senator Alex York said that's one of the brothers. What is so funny?
About that, exactly.
Trying to think about would you have to be strangled or buried alive?
And having to have the labor decision, anyway.
And then both him and Kaz go,
You guys are toughie.
so the next morning.
It just goes right into
Sorry.
like it's nothing.
I would say I'd
the
rather be
horrible,
strangled.
horrible way
I'd
to
rather-
die. It's like
Instead
anyway.
of, yeah.
I'd rather be strangled than
Get
like
it
that
kind of
suffering of the buried alive
over
type of
quicker.
thing.
No, it was
I
great.
agree.
So a Kansas newspaper reported that a friend of the Benders named Brockman was, they were like hanging him from a beam in the inn until
What?
unconscious, and then kept reviving him and then hanging him and then reviving him, like
Oh my God.
Like what they did to Deadpool.
basically to get information out of him.
Holy
They're like, "You're his friend, like what have you done? What's going on?" Don't feel bad for this guy because he was arrested 23 years later for the rape and murder of his own daughter. So
Whoa.
he was
Okay.
kind of a piece of anyway.
All right,
Yeah. Reporters from as far away as New York City and Chicago came when they heard about these murders. I mean, this is 1870, so it's like you got to.
Someone's got to get on a
Yeah.
horse.
That
like,
is
you got-
massive
yeah.
news.
Yeah, it is.
Someone's got to make a sojourn to deliver this news.
That is like that's a journey. It's a pilgrimage, really.
Oh God.
And the weird thing was too in 1870, it's like we've always been the way we are. The cabin was eventually destroyed by souvenir people. It's like
Souvenir people?
like the souvenir hunters were like, someone killed a lot of people here, and just like kind of.
I want this log.
We have always been horrible creatures. We've always been horrible creatures.
Murderbilia.
Memorabilia. Yeah.
So that state senator, Alex York, so Dr. York's brother, he offered $1,000 reward, which in today's money would be about $20,000 for the Benders family arrest. And then the governor actually offered $2,000, which was about $40,000, equivalents to 2019 money. There are some people who did escape from these people. And so based on some testimonials of people who had stayed at the inn and escaped, this is what was found to be the way in which they would attack and murder their people.
Oh, jeez.
The host would give the guest a seat of honor at the head of the table, which was positioned over the trapdoor.
Oh, my.
God.
And that was next to a curtain. So there would be this curtain that their back would be, that would be behind their back. And Kate, because she was cute and charismatic and attractive, she would distract people, talk to them. And then John and John Sr. would come from behind the curtain, open it up, and then strike the guest on the right side of the skull with a hammer, and then the victim's throat was cut by one of the women.
So probably because he was right-handed? Is that why? Like, it was just like a doom, doom, doom.
Yeah, I would assume on the right side. So yeah, it must have been.
Yeah.
And then the body was dropped through the trap door, and that would go down to the cellar where they would kind of prep the body and they would strip it, take all their belongings, and then they would just bury the property in the orchard. And not every victim was wealthy, so they kind of just did this for
Thrill
fun.
kill.
Yeah, they just liked to do it.
That is always fascinating me. There is just a certain switch in human brain where I just dig making people end.
Yeah.
I just dig seeing someone knowing that they're not around anymore and it's because of me. When I looked at someone and said, I don't want you to exist anymore. I get to do it, and then I get to go on with my day.
So a man named William Pickering said that when he had refused to sit near the wagon cloth because there were stains on it, he was threatened by Kate with a knife. Another man, a Catholic priest, said he saw one of the Bender men concealing a large hammer, which made him feel a little uneasy.
Oh, God,
so
yes.
he dipped.
Yeah, I'm done.
Two men went to the inn because Kate was she said she was a psychic reader and everything. So they decided to stay for dinner, and they felt really uncomfortable sitting next to the cloth.
Oh, that's Claire
More psychic than
sentience,
Claire.
right? Claire sentience,
Yes,
I think.
Clairvoyance?
But it's a sentience.
Claire
Just spidey sense.
Airfield?
Yeah, like something doesn't feel
Basically,
right.
just this ain't right.
I don't like things behind.
I don't like
curtains.
to stand in front of bloodstained curtains.
Yeah, I don't even like
Just saying.
windows.
They ate their meal at the main shop because there was like the general store in the front. But Kate became very abusive towards them. And then all of a sudden, two the men just came out from behind the curtain. The Bendermen.
Bendermen.
And they were like, why were they back there? And they just kind of paid and left. Which probably saved their lives.
Yeah.
And then also when people were scouring the cabin, bullet holes were found in the roof and the sides, which kind of meant some people tried to fight for their life maybe and kind of didn't get out.
Yeah, imagine having that sidearm right between your legs with your your left hand on it in case anything
This totally is
a
a
mess.
Coen Brothers movie waiting
Yes.
to happen, by the way.
I'm writing notes, by the way.
Someone get in
Amazing.
touch with them.
No one really found these people, the Benders.
Are you
they
kidding
escaped.
me?
They
No one
got
really
away
found them.
They're
completely?
still out there today.
There was a lot of
Or their descendants?
vigilantes that were like, oh, we got them, we killed them all. But they were but they never actually brought their bodies. So some people were just kind of claiming stuff, and no one was like,
Just
well,
to
you
give
didn't
people a
bring
false sense of
them.
rule
Right.
Jesus, back
Bill,
in the
if
day.
you bring me antlers one more time and expect me to believe that's a pelvis, I'm going to punch you.
How can you look at antlers and go pelvis? I'm like,
I
no,
know.
I'm saying-
Yeah,
Pelvis
no.
from antlers. Bill. Okay?
I looked it up that one time.
I'm not now.
You got me once.
not a dummy.
I mean, there was some records of them buying train tickets, but at some point, the mom and dad kind of went off on their own, and then John and Kate went off on their own. And the news of the escape spread and searched everywhere, and there was a search that continued on and off for 50 years.
Jeez.
And unfortunately, during that time, it's if two women were ever seen traveling together, obviously they need to be asked if they're Elvira and Kate, even though people said the husband and wife, and then the other
Went
two
together.
went off. But
yeah.
it's two women off on their own.
Isn't that weird?
obviously.
Unaccompanied?
Yeah, it's very-
What are you ladies
Thumbs
doing?
up.
So, yeah, guys, everything about this whole situation is making me feel very uneasy. Kansas doesn't really feel like home for me.
Never was a fan. Now I'm even less of a fan.
No,
It's terrible
it's not a
stuff.
good situation.
They have good baseball.
You
they?
would care about the baseball.
I do care about the baseball.
I am sure they've got
No,
all
I do.
all the murdering, but the baseball's good.
Yes. You are listening to Fort Fritz on Real Radio 104.1.
Fort Fritz on Real Radio 104.1.
Welcome back to Fort Fritz. I am your host, Fritz. We now jump right into Kaz's story about the Hinterkaifeck murders. That's Hinterkai and then Feck, Hinterkaifeck murders. It happened in Germany. Very, very creepy and unsolved. Let's take a listen. You are listening to Fort Fritz.
No.
You guys ever hear about the Hinterkaifeck murders?
No, not at all.
What? I hope it doesn't involve people being murdered in a barn.
Brutally murdered in a barn.
Oh, no.
Yeah, that is
March 31st,
interesting.
1922, the 6 inhabitants of the Gruber farm were brutally killed with a mattock.
What?
M-A-T-T-O-C-K.
Okay, and that is?
a pickaxe.
Jesus.
This took place in modern-day Weidhofen, Bavaria, Germany. The alleged date of the murders was March 31st, 1922. As we'll see throughout the story, investigation methods during the time were lacking by today's standards.
Yeah, I mean, even fingerprints probably weren't really a thing back then.
Wait, everybody see it happen? Nope, we'll never figure this one out, and that's it.
Tensions run high in pretzel country.
Natural causes.
Text in your response as to who did it at 77.
You could text back in the 20s?
Yeah.
It would just be
no
77 though, yeah. So the way that these murders were, the way that the bodies were discovered was in stark contrast to the, lacking investigation methods of the local police department there. The neighbor of the Gruber family was a little bit concerned that they had not performed their morning chores on Tuesday, and she came and knocked on the door to find out why.
That's why we have homeowners associations.
She was also the original HOA
Damn.
manager.
She's the one who discovered them?
Correct, yes.
Okay. Your goats
know.
look a little undusted. Those very dusty goats you have.
Dusty goats.
Dusty goats.
You have to
That's
dust
a bad
Someone
porn star name right
reported
there.
them.
That sounds like a farm chore, right? Dusting off your goats?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Goats get dusty, man. They're out there in the hay. They discovered the bodies on Tuesday, April 4th, which would have been about 4 days later. They again realized that they had been missing because the visible chores hadn't been done, and also one of the younger siblings had not been to school on that Monday or the Saturday before. Over the next 64 years, more than 100 suspects have been interviewed and questioned over the 64 years since the murder. The last questioning taking place in 1986. They still have not found any evidence linking a person to this crime.
Just take your time.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the more grisly aspects of the murder were that, first of all, the murderer apparently stayed in the house in the farm for several days after the murder. The neighbors reported seeing
Days?
Correct. The neighbors reported seeing smoke coming from the chimney. There had been evidence of food being cooked in the kitchen, and the cattle had been fed. So he did do some of the chores.
So it was a crime of circumstance kind of thing where it was like, well, not for nothing, I have this mansion now.
Yeah, he's like,
This entire farmland.
listen, it's not the cow's fault that I killed these people.
Right,
so.
well, he wasn't there when they showed up, so I can't imagine that he thought he was going to get to take over the farm by having killed the current inhabitants, which
He
would be
kinda
like
did.
the old way to take over, right? Like you just show up and kill everyone, then it's your farm now. In 1920s Bavaria, though, they apparently had a little bit more of a judicial system in place. So he had to scram. He wasn't there when they found the bodies. The evidence of him being there, or they, was there, but one of the victims actually didn't die right away. Most of the victims were killed in their sleep as they were laying in bed between the hours of 12 a.m. and 5 a.m., they imagine.
Is that a good way to go, though? I mean, I've always had this discussion with different people. Is like, do you want to just go like all of a sudden you're just gone, or do you want to know you're going to die? I mean, is it better just to be laying there and all of a sudden you stop being?
I'd rather be wide awake unless I'm being murdered. That sounds like,
agree.
Well, what
I'd
other
rather
thing would you be wide awake
surrounded
for?
by my
I
loved ones,
agree.
peacefully going,
Yeah.
unless someone is like, hey, I got this pickaxe. Guess what? It's your time, buddy.
That makes
Coming
sense.
for you.
Not-
That makes sense.
not what I,
So the short
long
answer
for.
would be depends on how you're going to die.
Yeah.
Long answer,
TBA.
short
TBD.
answer.
TLDR. So they killed the majority of the victims died in their sleep in their beds. There was also evidence that the murderer went back and attacked some of the previous victims after they had already been dead for a while and hit them again with the pickaxe.
Post-mortem.
Just
He
gotta make
post-mortem
sure.
Added additional wounds to their
Correct.
body.
It begs the question, not only who, as they've been trying to find out, but why? Like, what was the cause? What was the motive for this murder? And several hypotheses have been put forward. One of the prevailing ones being that the man was after some money, that knew that the Grubers had a small amount of money and some valuables in their house. And it actually turns out that none of the money or valuables was removed. There was no robbery, and very little of the house was actually sort of disheveled. It was
Ransacked.
Right, ransacked. It
I
was,
love that term, ransacked.
There was no fracas.
Other than what would have been caused by 6
Yes, correct.
murders with a pickaxe.
Other than that, a completely normal scene.
They got murdered in their house or in the barn?
They were murdered in their house.
Okay.
This could have been a transient person. One of the points that I saw that they'd found several cigarettes in the attic of the house, indicating that someone was waiting essentially for them to go to sleep to perform these murders.
Whoa.
I don't know. That could have just been a stressed out mom. Just like, kids, give me 5 minutes. Mommy will be right back. I'm going to go in the attic. I'm just going to
smoke a really stout Bavarian cigarette. 2 of them, in fact. Yeah. Leave me alone. There was a little bit of, I guess, mystery around.
A little bit?
Other than the whodunit, there was allegedly one of the younger Grubers was the product of an incestuous relationship, if you could call it that, between the father and one of the daughters.
Ooh.
Okay.
And according to the local court and some of the local townsfolk, a neighboring farmer named Lorenz Schlittenbauer had publicly claimed to be the boy's father in order to, I guess,
cover it up,
to dissuade, any kind of like looking into.
Did he name him Jon Snow?
To avoid blackmail situation, he or
well, so this man
him to publicly be the father of this child.
Correct. I guess they didn't want they had organized some type of agreement with this person so that he would pretend to be the father of this child when in fact it was not so.
Huh.
But the interesting thing about this guy was also one of the first people to quote unquote stumble across the dead bodies, along with a neighbor, and was alleged to have disturbed some of the bodies in the crime scene before the police arrived.
He was like, what, poking him with sticks and stuff?
Well, I don't know.
I'm just going to play some U2 really loud. Is that disturbing?
Everybody look over there! So, this Lorenz Schlittenbauer allegedly disturbed some of the bodies in the crime scene, had some type of motive, depending upon whose encounter or account of the story you take, but they questioned him several times over the years following the murder and never found any evidence to link Lorenz Schlittenbauer to the murders.
Makes a great malt liquor, though.
Schlittenbauer?
Schlittenbauer's a really good malt liquor. It's very smooth, very smooth.
So this is basically a crime scene where there is not much evidence. There's a lot of hearsay, and they continued to investigate it for 64 years?
Correct.
And how did they find 100 people that would give witness to something that happened in
over
one
that span
building?
of time?
They questioned over 100 suspects.
That's crazy.
And the numbering people just...
How many people hated these people?
Well,
it was like, well, it could have been anybody. We all wanted to pickaxe them. We all wanted to.
It was like transient people who had like wanderers and people who had no real, like they were just interviewing, like trying to just canvass, like, who could have possibly done this. And never apparently got any closer.
It's also, very just a couple years after World War I, the country's in shambles. There's probably a lot of transient people just wandering around, making little hobo signs like this place has good
sketchy
sausage,
transient German wanderers.
They do good bindle repair.
Yeah.
Nice.
All it takes too is like one geographic area to be inundated with phone calls to 911. Yeah, I saw that one thing, and then like the folklore happens with
mass
the moth.
hysteria.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Actually, the investigation extended into 2007 was the latest discussion about it. The students, and I'm quoting from the article, the students at the Police Fachschule in Fürstenfeldbruck tried to go at the case with sort of modern crime scene investigation techniques, and they concluded that so much of the crime scene had degraded, so much of the evidence had degraded. And
46 or 64 years
64 years later.
64 years will do that.
They basically just said, no, there's no way.
There's no more blood on the straw because there's no more straw for the blood to be on.
They did say, though, despite the setbacks of the deterioration of the evidence and the crime scene, that the students at this police academy, as they were sort of researching a cold case, they did name a prime suspect, but declined to name him out of respect for the still living relatives.
Oh, wow.
Oh, okay. It just boggles my mind that there was such interest. Is it the fact that the police force is so efficient in Germany and Bavaria that they solve all these murders? So there's this one cold case that they just can't let go.
I feel like it's particularly
74, it's 84. God, what is it? 1922.
Yeah,
it's almost 100 years later now.
It's true.
Yeah, I think the the combination of how grisly it was, the fact that it involved children, and it was an entire family, and it was completely devoid of like a real suspect.
Right, but
I
we've
think kind
talked
of-
about other grisly murders that have
And
happened in
random
Germany.
grisly
Why
murders.
this one case? I just wonder.
I don't know. Only time will tell.
That's it. You know, let's just wrap.
Fort Fritz on Real Radio 104.1.
Welcome back to Fort Fritz. I'm going to end it on this Mandaddy story. It's called The Bewildering Death of Blair Adams. Now, this was a Canadian man who, just started going crazy. Let's take a listen. You are listening to Fort Fritz on Real Radio 104.1.
Who'll be following him? We don't know. That's the problem. Have you ever heard of the tale of Blair Adams?
No, I haven't.
No.
Oh, God.
You'd be running too if you knew the tale. So now I'm going to tell you the tale, so you're probably going to start running. Many classic horror films are based on actual cases, such as Amityville Horror or Exorcist. And some modern films, such as The Conjuring, have a basis in reality. But there's one modern film, It Follows,
Oh, yes.
that might have had a real-life analog
What?
Whoa.
No.
in the life and death of Blair Adams. Now, Blair was a very well-liked foreman of a local construction company in British Columbia, Canada. He was known as a friendly, affable guy, always wearing a smile and without an enemy in the world. But that all changed in the summer of 1996. His mood began to change, and he started having wild mood swings. He began to lose sleep, and his demeanor grew darker and darker. His mother noticed and asked him what was wrong, and he responded, "I don't think I should tell you about it."
Ooh, that's
a
creepy.
terrible answer.
Yeah, not the one Mommy wants to hear.
Exactly.
Now, the next day, July 5th, 1996, Adams went to his bank and withdrew all of his money, $6,000 Canadian. He also emptied his safety deposit box containing thousands of dollars worth of jewelry, gold, and platinum.
That's how you do it.
That's how you do it. Just do it all at once. Pull the plug, rip off the Band-Aid.
Also have some kind of security blanket is what I meant.
No, I'll talk about
Wait,
just
how old was this guy?
He was a foreman, so he's probably in his late 20s, 30s.
What? And he's got a safety deposit box full
He's
of
a
jewels? He's got
family.
like a mini... Oh,
Family.
Okay, all right. I thought
It's, a
this guy
safety
was like
it's his family. Yeah.
miniature Scrooge McDuck, but of Canada.
So this guy was on some kind of lockbox list. So it's like and or, right? So this guy could open it.
Yeah, like the family jewels, technically.
Damn.
Actually, the family jewels.
I feel like he was
on him.
very financially responsible.
Now, 2 days later, he went to the U.S.-Canadian border, but was turned away. It seems a man desperately looking to leave the country with a bunch of cash, gold, and jewels is looked at as suspicious, and so they turned him away.
True that.
Damn Canada.
Now, so the next day, he formally left his job. He quit, bought a plane ticket to Frankfurt, Germany, which was due to leave in like 2 days. He then went to a friend's house to ask them to smuggle him into the U.S. right now. That he couldn't wait the 2 days.
Ooh.
Now, the friend noted that he was in a high state of panic, and she was unwilling to help him. So Blair went to the airport, got a refund for his ticket, and rented a car. Then he drove to a different part of the border, and this time was able to get through. And immediately went to Seattle, went to their airport, got in a flight to Washington, D.C.
Home of Starbucks.
That's
The Emerald City.
and that's why we need a wall.
Thank you.
Jeez.
Now, he landed, rented another vehicle in D.C., and drove that straight to Knoxville, Tennessee, about 500 miles away. Just straight, just went for it. Now, he arrived in Knoxville and stopped at a gas station, complaining of car troubles.
Knoxville.
It seemed the car wouldn't start. The attendant checked the car and found he was using the wrong key to start it.
Jesus.
Even though he just drove 500 miles, they searched him and around the car. They could not find the key anywhere, even though he had just driven there, had just gotten out of the car.
So he is mentally deteriorating at this point.
Yeah, he's starting to detach. So they planned to tow the truck to a nearby motel, and Blair hitchhiked there before a truck could arrive. He went in and out of the lobby several times, about 5 times over the course of an hour, walking in and out. Employees said he appeared paranoid, nervous, agitated, constantly looking over his shoulder. He eventually booked a room, left the lobby at 7:37 p.m., but never went back to the room. never used the room. The next morning, his body was found in a parking lot about a half a mile from the hotel.
What?
He was dead as someone had ripped open his shirt and removed his pants.
Okay.
What?
Both of his socks were on, but
Ooh.
turned inside out.
Oh.
Scattered around his body were about $5,000 U.S. and Canadian money.
Okay.
There's also a bag of gold and jewels at the scene with some platinum in it.
Definitely makes
So
it suspicious.
all of his stuff was there. Everything was there.
You mean,
Also,
like scattered around him? Do you mean
Like,
like
just-
in the general area, or like specifically around him? Like
no, just like just
okay.
yeah, just like
So he was
yeah.
dead and all this stuff was just left there.
Yeah, nothing was touched. And also the keys to the car were found on the ground 10 feet from his body.
Oh, thank God they found them.
So at least that'd be the worst to die and not know where your keys
Yeah.
were. I've been searching for them. They're right there.
That
the whole time.
anxiety.
Oh, you
Ooh,
get to the
that's a bad
afterlife. They're
one.
like,
with
"Ugh."
that?
Yeah.
And then when you get to the afterlife, they're like, you know, they were right there. And you're like, oh,
Son of a bitch, the whole time.
Takes like a millennia to get over that.
He's like, how long do I have to be here before I can just off and go back?
Now, his body had several cuts and bruises, but none were even close to being life-threatening. The final cause of death? A single, horrific blow to the abdomen that literally ruptured his stomach.
What?
Oh.
One hit, stomach blown, dead.
Wow.
That's how this dude died. There were 0 suspects. He had no enemies. None of his friends or family had any clue why he was so afraid or why anyone would ever kill him. Blair didn't know anyone in Tennessee and was not connected to the area in any way by business, family, or anything. It wasn't a robbery. It wasn't a drug deal gone bad. So what happened? Is it possible that when the hair raises on the back of your neck and you feel that someone is watching or even following you, that you may be right?
Damn.
That was smooth.
Woo.
One
Okay.
punch.
Okay, so
Oh my.
okay, so he thought he was being seen by someone, right? That's just what he said.
He
Right?
just, well, I mean, he never
was
really
acting like it.
He never really expressed it. He just acted that way constantly.
Yeah.
He was on the move constantly. People said when he kept on coming in and out of the lobby, and that he would keep on looking over his shoulder, like that that something was coming for him. You know, he got the plane ticket. That wasn't going to be. That was too long. He had to keep going.
He's also crisscrossing, trying to get kind of like subterfuge on it. Like,
Right.
How many pounds of pressure per square inch do you think it takes to burst a stomach? That's got to be a good amount
It's
of
only
force.
5 to knock someone out on their jaw, right? Like that's the math.
I
Like,
think so.
Yeah, 5
Let's
pounds.
find out.
5 pounds of pressure on the jaw is supposed to be able to knock you out.
I think it's
Okay.
also 5 pounds of pressure per square inch to rip off a scrotum. In a
Damn.
downward
Oh.
force.
Yeah, you guys have been doing some interesting studying on your off time.
Don't with us.
Yeah, not at all.
Very weird math.
This is how we're going to open this safe.
Gonna rip off.
the balls off this safe.
Rip these balls right off the safe.
Vault balls.
The family jewels.
Balls.
Good band name. There you go.
Balls. Dude, that's like totally just core punk. You know.
Full balls.
Yeah.
Up next, Bungalower and the Bus. You are listening to Real Radio 104.1.
Until next time, pleasant dreams.